Hello and welcome to today's video in the series of Economic versus the Environment. And what we're looking at today is areas of conflict and the growth in wealth versus other aims. The conflict between environmental concerns and economic growth only occurs because of how we see happiness. Historically, the Western countries have almost always seen greater wealth as the road to happiness. They believe even if money can't buy you happiness, it can go a long way towards it. Many of the things that make people unhappy, for example, a broken heart, can't be fixed by money or anything else, so we should leave them out of the debate. Many of the problems that cause unhappiness, like bad health, can be improved if you have money. Not everyone has the same idea about what is happiness, but if you have money, you can choose your own road to it. As a result of this belief system, Western countries wanted to measure wealth because that was seen as the closest possible measure of happiness. GDP, or gross domestic product, was developed in the 1930s as a measure of how a country was doing economically. It doesn't measure wealth. It doesn't even measure the increase in wealth. It measures the amount of activity. This is a very inefficient way to measure wealth. It's like trying to decide if your business is okay by measuring only the sales. To measure how a business is doing, you need to know profits, not only sales. But when we measure the performance of countries, we use only GDP, which is like looking only at sales. Nevertheless, today all countries use it and watch it very closely. Voting in democratic elections is often affected by how fast GDP is growing. So the guy on the left is saying, so your sales are going up fast. That's great. What about your profits? And the guy on the right is saying, sorry, I haven't got a clue. They only tell me the sales figures. But if it's going up, it's got to be good, right? Another way to look at this is that you get figures for each player in a football match you didn't watch. They only tell you how many meters each player ran. They don't tell you how many goals they scored or how many they stopped or how many tackles they made or how many times they lost the ball, just how hard they worked. That's exactly what GDP is, the amount of activity. It doesn't tell you anything about the result of that activity. However, just like the football, you can assume that the player isn't running around for nothing. The football player wants his team to win. The business person wants to make a profit. So to interpret the figures, we have to assume that on average, the work they are doing is successful. There will be some bad players who run a lot but don't have much skill, and there will be some businesses that close. But on average, they will be successful. You can see that the level of work a footballer does only gives you a rough guide to how successful they are. And it is definitely possible to have two players who run the same amount in a game, but one has a lot of effect on the result and the other not much. GDP figures have the same problems. Quote, this is from a book called Natural Capitalism. GDP only measures money spent, not value received. But there is a world of difference between the exchange of dollars and the creation of well-being. The definition of economic growth includes all expenditures, regardless of whether society benefits or loses. Growth includes crime, hospital emergency room charges, prison maintenance, dump fees, environmental cleanups, the cost of lung disease, oil spills, cancer treatment, divorce shelters for women beaten by their husbands, every throwaway object left by the road, and alcohol sold to homeless people. That's the end of the quote. Another quote. GDP is simply a measure of money changing hands. It makes no distinction between desirable and undesirable, or costs and gains. End of quote. And that's from Jonathan Rowe of Redefining Progress, which is a public policy think tank that is analyzing and reframing measures of progress. Why do we still use GDP? GDP has the longest history of governments knowing the figures. If you want to compare 2020 with 1950, a 70-year period, GDP is the only statistic you can use. No other figures go back to 1950. But as shown by the quotes above, economists have started asking questions about how good GDP as a measure of happiness. Other philosophies or religion value other things more than happiness. Buddhism, for example, values peace of mind higher. Many religions ask people to give away some of their money to help people in need. This is the opposite of trying to become as wealthy as possible. In the USA, people are working longer hours than they did in the 1970s. Women are also employed much more now than in the 1970s, with effects on the family. And this is often done to maintain their standard of living, not even to improve it. All this increases GDP, but it doesn't sound like greater happiness. Another quote from Natural Capitalism. Between 1979 and 1995, there was no increase in real income for 80% of working Americans. People are working harder today than at any time since World War II. While income rose 20% in the 15-year period from 1979, 97% of that increase went to families in the top 20% of income earners. The majority of families, in fact, saw their incomes reduce. Unquote. So you can see the picture here. It says from 1947 to 1979, the income of the bottom fifth of Americans rose by 122%. So that's roughly from the end of World War II to 1980. From the introduction of Reaganomics in 1979 to 2009, the income of the top 1% rose by 270%, while the other 99%'s income remained stagnant. Stagnant means it didn't move. So the picture is of Ronald Reagan, who was the president at that time, who made big changes in the US economy, and he removed a lot of laws controlling businesses. And this was called Reaganomics, a word made up from his name, Reagan, and economics. Note, in economics, increase in real income means increase in income minus the rate of inflation. Economists use this figure because if your wages go up by 5%, but prices also go up by 5%, you can still buy only the same amount of stuff. If your wages go up by 5%, but prices go up by only 4%, you can buy 1% more stuff. So your situation has improved by the percentage of the wage increase minus the percentage of inflation. And we say the real increase is 1%. So here's an example of what they're talking about. Even if their country's wealth has gone up, some people in the USA have become poorer. Their personal wealth has gone down. So here we have, in the left-hand column, we have three different people, person A, person B, person C, plus the total GDP. And then the next column is 2000, the one after that is 2015, and the right-hand column is the change between 2000 and 2015. So person A got 100. In fact, person A, B, and C all got 100 in 2000, and the total was 300. By 2015, person A has got 150, so his has gone up 50%. Person B has only got 90, so they've gone down 10%. Person C has gone down 10% as well. So the total has gone up 30, from 300 to 330, but out of the three people, one has got more than 100% of the increase, and the others have gone backwards. So, first, change the goal. For over 70 years, economics has been fixated on GDP or national output as its primary measure of progress. Fixated means over-focused. That fixation has been used to justify extreme inequalities of income and wealth, coupled with unprecedented destruction of the living world. For the 21st century, a far bigger goal is needed, meeting the human rights of every person within the means of our life-giving planet. And that's from a lady called Kate Raworth and a book called Donut Economics. Here's another quote. Growth is one of the stupidest purposes ever invented by any culture. We have got to have an enough. In response to the constant call for more growth, we should always ask, growth of what? And why? And for whom? And who pays the cost? And how long can it last? And what's the cost to the planet? And how much is enough? And that's a quote from Donella Meadows, one of the lead authors of the 1972 Limits of Growth report. The United Nations has created an HDI index as an alternative. This includes GDP, but also balances that against literacy and life expectancy. This works well for developing countries, but not so well for rich countries. However, it's worth noting that life expectancy looks set to drop in the USA for the first time ever. Other groups have come up with other measures, but they are often idealistic. They include all the things that might cause happiness, but they ignore the fact that it's almost impossible to measure some of them. So, conclusion, we are probably stuck with GDP as the measure in the near future, but with more ways to qualify it and try to cover the areas that GDP leaves out. So why all this about GDP? Environmentalists don't only say that we need to use natural resources better in ways that don't hurt the environment. They also say that the resources themselves are close to running out in some cases. So we have to find a way to use less resources. Trying to increase GDP every year causes the opposite of using less of the planet's resources. A last word here about population changes, which could mean the end of GDP. Many countries are looking at falling population. Italy and Japan are expected to halve their population by 2100. China's population has already started to fall and is expected to be 2/3 of present levels by 2100. Falling population means falling GDP, and governments won't like that. So they will probably move away from GDP to a way of measuring that shows a more accurate picture. And this is the end, my friend. See you next time.